Not that we're here to advocate for syndication over REITs.
Why would we do that?
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack. Hey everybody, welcome back into another episode of the Get Invested podcast. I am your host, Jordan.
And I'm Matthias Wilson. I guess I should
have
said
a last name
Matthias
too,
Wilson.
I guess. That's fine. I'm Jordan Stone. We have two names. We both have two names, Matthias. You're not special. Anywho, we're excited as always to be here, even if we,
I'm pretty special.
messed up our intro. It's fine. We're going to roll with it. We're leaving all of this in.
Do it. Ain't got time.
We're excited to be here to talk, as always, all things investing, real estate, and real estate investing. But before we get into that, what's going on in Wilson land? That's anything fun?
You may or may not notice the
hilarious?
steam emanating in the room around me. The air conditioning has been out for the whole week in my office. It has not cooled down significantly in Florida yet for the fall season, and so it is quite warm in here. I've been kind of camping in a coffee shop down the road, a little local shop that I really like for most of the week. But obviously, this is where all the recording equipment is, so I'm here for this. So if I keel over, pass out, just call 911 and pour water.
I just
on me.
assumed that steam was like a stench. Like you put on some filter, like a cartoon filter, and it was just wafting off of you. Well, that's a bummer. It's I'm not gonna lie, it's been in the 70s pretty much consistently for quite some time now for us.
Now we hit 91 most days this week. 91 to 94.
We're cracking 80 maybe. Well, I hope that sounds like the AC people are very busy, so hopefully they get less busy soon.
Would be nice.
Now, is this you? Sorry, guys, this is off air. We were talking about this already, so just to kind of loop it in, he's been trying to get somebody to come out and look at it, and it hasn't happened yet. Now, are you talking to the property managers?
I'm not talking to the property managers. Jen was here yesterday when one of the AC guys came by and was doing something, ordering parts or something. I don't know. But he was pretty non-committal on when they were actually going to have apparently it needs a full replacement. So I guess, I don't know if they have the units in stock or they got to order it or what. So there's been a lot of telephone games. I haven't been talking directly to anybody. It's all been kind of passed to me through a bunch of different avenues.
A full replacement for, this is it's like for those of you who have not seen it, it's like it's a nicer strip mall area, essentially. It's like, what, 7, 8 companies in that one little...
there's more than that because it goes on down and around the corner. So
yeah, but I didn't think that was all one continual building.
No. There's probably 4 or 5 units per building, and then there's 4 or 5 buildings in the each. So it goes on around.
So that could be a pretty big unit, I guess, is where I'm headed with that. So
I think it's just for this. I think it's each unit, each space has their own. Because there's a thermostat in here, so I think they each have their own actual unit, and apparently it's pretty old, so that thus prompting the full replacement. Because a lot of times, hey, the inside unit may be still good, but it's completely incompatible with anything that we would put in the outside unit. So you end up having to do a lot replacing both the interior unit and the outside unit.
And I would imagine depending on the age, AC units in Florida age the same way dogs age to humans. Since like Florida years AC is 7, 1 year it's 7.
Yeah, it's not. You're not wrong.
In the country.
It's like saltwater air, man. It'll get you. It'll get you. Anything electronic and metal. Yeah, but hopefully that'll be resolved sometime soon. But what's going on with you?
Well, I'll make it quick since we don't want you to die of heat exhaustion or dehydration. But before I jump in, I wanted to circle back to something I've been meaning to ask you about. How's the goals coming? How are your workout goals coming?
Pretty good.
Are you still working, doing that whole regimen?
Yep. I am. I'm still lifting. I've gotten a lot stronger so we've been doing it almost exactly 2 months as of like this week. So definitely a lot stronger than I was. Feeling, I have, I've had many back issues over the years. So I've been very cognizant of that as we go, with the personal trainer who's helping me, and he's very good at, hey, let's work on isolating this, one, grouping exercises well so that I'm not over exerting myself in one particular muscle section, especially, my back. But also he's got a lot of good stretches. So if we go heavy where I'm really compressing the spine a little bit, think squatting or something like that, he's really good about great stretches to kind of release everything back out after we're done with the lift. And so, I'm doing heavy lifts and leaving the gym, after stretching, leaving the gym feeling like, hey, man, no problem, which is good. That's not normal. Normally I'm tight, at least a little bit tight or a little bit sore from my, spinal lower back sore. But lately it's been going really well. The weight is slowly leaking off, but I think we're on pace for the goals that I have.
Okay. Yeah, stretching, man, that's cannot be overstated how
No.
important it is and how much we miss the mark on how much it would be good
exactly.
for us. Now, is he doing anything where he's trying to go ahead? I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying I'm going to the chiropractor regularly too, which all of this is preventative maintenance in order to keep myself from hurting myself. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, because I mean, I was just asking. It seems like he would also be focusing on
core
strengthening, like strengthening the muscles around the area that's problematic, so that it can support it.
100%.
Because I remember when I wrecked my ankle when I was at Georgia, then I went to PT for quite some time, and it was nice because I had insurance through my fellowship, so it was very. I mean, I didn't have any money; I was a student, but it was very cheap, so I could go a lot. As soon as I got there, I thought they were going to do things with my ankle, and they're like literally the first 4 or 5 sessions were just this PT wrenching me to stretch everything. She was like, your IT band is so tight. I'm like, really? How tight it is? And she was like, how I just pushed on it and you were like, oof, that hurts. Then she like pressed my cheek in the same amount and it was barely noticeable how much
it felt like really dug in.
Yeah, it felt like she grazed me and apparently that was cause enough pain. But yeah, so I just remember being so much more about stretching and strengthening my legs to protect my ankles. Anyways, which, is what revolutionized Steph Curry's game. He had all those ankle problems and he did all this stuff with core and legs and stuff to protect his ankles. And that also did that. But then that's when he suddenly was able to casually shoot 35 footers. I mean, that and the fact he's a great shooter, together. Well, my back was hurting a little bit this weekend, not from the workouts or lifting, although those happened as well, but because I was changing the spark plugs in my car. Yeah, and the design of my car, they decided that they wanted to put the spark plugs down a little bit lower than probably midway through the engine block on either side. And there was a pretty tight fit on the back ones. And I got my ratchet stuck at one point because I shouldn't have been using this one. It's one that's levered, so it moves like this. What's the word? Yep. Articulates, which is good, good. But I need to get a new one. The button to release the socket, it doesn't do a good job. It sticks. And so it was so tight that I had to by hand put the spark plug socket through after, removing the wires, everything. Then the wobble extender, connect that, then the ratchet.
Man.
And then have to separate to pull it back out. And luckily, honestly, my buddy Ash came over and he has thinner fingers and he could get in there and actually do a lot more with his hands, whereas I was using a screwdriver. So I was bent over my engine.
How long did it take you?
Long. Well, that's kind of hard to say just because when he came over, he helped me, but we also hung out a little bit. And I kind of took it easy, but I started around 15 and then immediately realized, I need a different ratchet for this. Which I don't mind going to buy a 1/4 inch flat low profile socket wrench because I'll use it, but I don't want to go do it right this second because I was, I've just took things out of my car, but probably on the whole, it took me about 4 hours. And because you had to take out, and I was also replacing the battery, but you had to take both of the batteries out because I have the start stop battery. I had to kind of dismantle a big part of the air filtration system, take off a few other brackets and stuff to get to them. And then but I mean, honestly, about an hour of it was getting that one place unstuck. Now, to the credit of the DIY video, they did say that one was going to be particularly tough. But I took everything with a grain of salt. He was very straightforward, but he was timing it, and his whole point was they're going to tell you they have to bring up the engine block, and it's going to take this long. Look how long it took me to do it the way you can do it, and it took him 40 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, bro, it took you 40 minutes.
This is what you do.
Yeah, but I mean, I was fine. It was perfectly fine. I was happy to do it in an afternoon, not pay $600. And I like doing that kind of stuff. And now I actually have the time. Now, the next morning, I was supposed to get up and drive about an hour and some away to play golf with my dad. And I woke up. And when I put everything back together, I obviously started the car and drove it around. It was great. Woke up the next morning, went to start the car. Nothing. not clicking, nothing, just completely dead. So I'm like, Christ, what did I do? So I call him. I'm like, I'm gonna just hope that this is a connection issue. Go back in there and redo them all or whatever. And it was just didn't get one of the battery things tight enough that it was
Sure.
It could or could not connect. So as soon as I got in there, it was fine. But it was a scary moment where I was like, okay, I just did all this stuff on my car where I kind of took apart a decent amount of stuff. And then I was like all pumped the night before, like I did it. And then nothing. But no, it's fine. I was successful. Huzzah.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah. It was that was successful. Sports wise, it was a rough weekend for
finally had a
Jordan's
pretty good
teams.
weekend over here.
Yeah, hey, congratulations, Chiefs. You no longer have the same record as the Panthers. Way to go. You're now one game better. But anywho, yeah, UGA lost. LSU lost. UNC didn't play, but I'm assuming they also lost. They got defeated by their bye date. Anywho, all right. Well, let's move on from losses and talk about. I presume, hopefully, one goes into this for gains.
Ooh,
yeah. We're gonna talk about REITs today, which I didn't actually know it was pronounced that until Mark said it a few podcasts back. But apparently, that is what it is.
Yeah,
how
REITs.
the acronym of Real Estate Investment Trust. Real Estate Investment Trust are pronounced as the acronym goes, REITs. So we're going to talk about those, get into what they are and kind of how they compare to other types of real estate investments, primarily what we offer, syndications. Correct, Matthias? Am I correct in this comparison?
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of walk through some of the special tenets of REITs, because you got to think of REITs as like it's a stock you can buy. Most of them are like publicly traded ones or stocks you can buy. So it's like, hey, what's the difference between investing in real estate via a REIT or investing in real estate via something like what we do, syndications? And there's pros and cons to each, obviously. We'll kind of talk down. We'll break them down along a few different kind of concepts, and we'll kind of compare and contrast each of them as we go. But yeah, that's they're an interesting vehicle for they're a lot easier to invest in per se than like a private offering or even buying your own investment property, things like that. So, but it's interesting to discuss for sure.
Well, I was actually going to look and just see here. So first of all, for everybody that may not be familiar, just very straightforward. A real estate investment trust is essentially you can buy stock in it on the stock exchange, whether that be New York or NASDAQ or what have you. You can buy stock like you can any other security on the market. You can buy it just like you can buy Google. But their business model is owning and operating real estate versus making phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right.
Yep.
I was looking at I have a bunch of things pulled up here, but there's a list. Wikipedia has a list of all public REITs, but it doesn't tell me how many there are. But it looks like, if I were to guess, there's about 50 that are big enough.
There's probably more than that. There's probably some smaller ones. Collectively,
that's what I meant. Ones that are big enough to rate. Sure.
Something I had pulled up over here. Apparently, the publicly traded REITs own 2.5 trillion in assets, which is a pretty significant number. So
yes,
just that like 2.5 trillion. True. The gross assets, it says the gross assets owned by REITs across the U.S. are 4.5 trillion. So, but the public ones own the majority of that in the 2.5. So, the first thing I wanted to actually, let's talk really quick, kind of definitionally. So obviously it owns and operates real estate, like we said. Something that in order to be qualified as a REIT, it has to pay out 90% of its taxable income as dividends to its investors, shareholders. That's a certain thing that, because what it does is when they do that, they qualify to be a REIT and they don't pay corporate taxes. Basically, they become almost like pass-through entities, which is similar to what we do.
Okay.
So there's no corporate level taxes that are paid because they're distributing. It's basically they get to deduct dividends to shareholders as an expense. So they never make any money according to, at the corporate level, they don't. Even though obviously they, you got the corporate salaries and all the different things that are going on up there. But it's a way to preserve kind of a lot of the rents that come in, the profits from the rents, they send them directly to shareholders, and then the shareholders pay taxes on them on their own personal tax returns. Okay. So, Yeah, which is, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But basically, the first thing I wanted to talk about in kind of the difference between what we do versus a publicly traded REIT is along the lines of control. And obviously, if you're, well, even if you have the most control when you're buying the property yourself, right? So if you're going to go out and buy a house, a rental house, you have the most control over that scenario as the individual. You have a little bit less control, but still more control than a REIT when you're investing in a private offering like this, because you can choose the operator, you can communicate directly with the operator, and you can ask a whole bunch of questions prior to any movements, any investment that you make. Obviously, with a REIT, none of that really exists. Now, you can read their prospectus. Every company has a prospectus and plans and strategies and whatever that they talk about, and all their mandatory financial reporting and things like that. So you can obviously dig into all those things when you're thinking about buying a REIT, but the only control you have is how much you invest. Really, you're not going to how much and when, right? So you can time it well. You can try to time it well based on macro factors. If you feel like, hey, the economy is going down, the REIT prices are going to go down, so I'll wait, and then when they go down, you buy, and then they go up or whatever. You can control that timing, but there's very little other control. You can't call up the CEO of the company and go, hey, you know what? Let's drop everything in Atlanta and let's move our holdings to Dallas. Let's start picking up. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So that's something that people need to consider, and I consider. Like, I'm invested in REITs. I have REITs in my portfolio when I'm in stocks that I'm in, but I'm not under any illusion of control in that matter, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, that's one reason that it's good to make the distinction about how they qualify as one and the way in which they pay out their dividends or distributions. I guess technically it'd be more distributions than dividends.
Well, they qualify as dividends when it's a REIT doing it. We don't qualify as dividends because we're not even publicly traded, and we're not subject to the SEC. These guys are subject to the SEC.
Okay, so it is dividends. All right.
It is. Yep.
Well, but the way they do that is different, obviously, than
sure.
And I'm assuming that they can make business decisions about how much is passed through or distributed. That what the dividend is, like any other company does, where they're like, okay,
sure, yeah, they're going to hold some on to. They hold on to some because they're going to reinvest it and buy more. Whatever. Sure, just like any other business, they can hold on to reserves and all these things. But
yeah,
basically, they're required to pay out at least 90% of the taxable income. So basically, net income it needs to be paid out, and then that other 10% they can either hold on to, put in reserves, or reinvest, or buy more property, whatever it happens to be.
Right, but on the other hand, even though there is that distinction, they're, for the most part, other than that, they're going to be run like any other major corporation that is big enough to be publicly traded. At which point, I mean, you can go to the stockholder meeting, your shareholder meeting.
Yeah, unless your name
maybe you have enough to vote, but other than that, you're just finding out what's going on.
If your name is Buffett and you walk into those meetings, people might listen to you, but if your name is Wilson or Stone and you walk into those meetings, not a lot of people are gonna care if you have some thoughts on the Seattle submarkets or whatever. They're gonna be like, well, good talk.
So I think one of the things that I know this is one of their selling points, but it's one of those things like you say, like you talk about control. Well, that's the sliding scale. There is, if you want it to be like a 50-50 thing about it, like an equalizer, on an audio thing where you're going -1, -2, +1. The less control you have, though, the easier it is to invest.
Sure.
Right. That's the big thing. And then, so the more control you have, the harder it is to invest, all the way to being the person who owns, like, who actually purchases the property, or in our case, puts it all together.
Sure. And there's also, like, you may not want a lot of control, right? You're just like, hey, man, my day job is an engineer. I'm not trying to, analyze office spaces in New York all the time. So, I mean, there's benefits and challenges that come with, each of these aspects. So, I mean, the REITs I'm invested in, I found a sector I wanted to invest in. I put money in there, and that's the extent of my, other than like monitoring the corporate, make sure, hey, they're not firing CEO for embezzlement or something, right. Other than that, that's basically all I'm doing. I have no more control, and then I'm just kind of riding it for dividends in the long term.
So just to tie a bow on this, the National Association of REITs lists 168 of them.
I thought there might be more than 50.
Yeah.
Seems like there would be.
But a lot of these are clearly very small and very new. So as far as like ones that like the average person might want to find and invest in, it's much smaller than this.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're talking about control versus ease of investing. That's one thing. What's our next?
Well, next we kind of hinted on earlier is the tax status. So
okay,
when you get dividends from like what's called a qualified dividend from a company, it's that company, that corporation's already paid taxes and they're making dividends. So like a Amex or somebody, for the most part, it's considered a qualified dividend, which is taxed differently than a REIT dividend. So REITs are considered, they haven't paid taxes, right? Because they're exempt from the corporate tax structure if they pay it out. So it's REIT income to the individual shareholder is actually taxed at your marginal income level. It's not taxed as a long-term capital gain like most qualified dividends are. It's taxed as ordinary income, which if you're a high earner, that could be, I mean, we're talking, up close to 40%, depending on if what state you live in and things like that. So that could be a real problem in terms of, and that's one of the ways it contrasts with what we do is almost everything we do is distributions included is taxed as a long-term capital gain, a passive activity in the private equity offerings like what we do in syndications. And it's also, if you own real estate, like if you own rental real estate outright, same. It's taxed as a capital gain, not as active income. So that's something that's definitely a disadvantage on the REIT side, because especially if you're a high net worth individual or high income earner, that's going to really, if you're you're below and have low marginal tax rates, it's not going to be that big of a difference. Your tax bracket may be 15%, which would, or 10%, whatever the, some long-term capital gains rates. So it may make no difference to you at all, but it can if you're a high earner.
Okay. So should we maybe just clarify exactly all the ways in which that would matter? I mean, yes, I think it falls into a tax bracket this way, or it falls into a tax bracket this way, but there's a little bit more, there would be a little bit more to it as far as it being a long-term capital gains, right? Versus it being essentially every year you're paying a marginal tax rate, or no?
Well, most real estate, even if it's distributed 6 months after you got it, if it's a distribution or think dividend, and it's distributed, it's still taxed at a long-term capital gain rate.
Okay.
It's more, so most of the time you're not. Yeah. So most of the time, again, in whether you're buying a property yourself or investing in a syndication, most of the time you're not going to show a real profit quickly. It's very rare that you buy a property and then you immediately show a profit in terms of, like, according to the IRS, because you got all the depreciation and you got all the costs of acquisition, which are expenses and kind of would wipe away any of your income for the year.
Right. Well, that was kind of where I was going with this, is there's no offsetting the REIT dividend in that way.
Correct. Very true. The depreciation is all taken before that dividend comes out by its taxable income. So depreciation is already taken off all these properties by the REIT corporate structure. So you don't get to take advantage of, I mean, obviously it's probably a higher dividend for you because they're showing more income, but it's already been taken advantage of. You can't deduct anything against your dividend income. That's correct. That's a good point.
Okay. Well, that was what I was making sure that I was clear on, and I guess we were clear on to others, is that particular advantage of the syndication dividend is not going to be there for REITs, in addition to it being taxed at a different rate. Not that we're here to, advocate for syndication over REITs.
Why would we do that?
All right. Well, let's move on to, I think we wanted to move on to ideas of liquidity next. So
yeah. So this is one of the big advantages for the REIT, is that you could, if you own a REIT in your brokerage account or your retirement account, however you own your REITs or your stocks, you could walk in tomorrow and go, I want to take all my money out of the REIT, and you could do it. You could just sell all the stock, cash out, and you can have, the next day it would be in your settlement account. Boom, there's all your money. So that's a huge advantage over the private equity market or owning your own house or whatever, because you can't walk in. Jordan, can you walk into a house and say, I want to sell this house today, and then somebody just hands you a big bag of cash? And that would be awesome. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, big bag of cash with the money symbol on it, as we all know. All
otherwise,
cash
how would you know it was cash?
Exactly.
Cartoon bag of money. Yeah, so that obviously that's a big advantage, is that you can make split second decisions and pivot if personally I don't want to invest in real estate, I want to invest in crypto, or whatever. You can make a decision and turn on a dime. Obviously, with private real estate holdings and private equity, not the case. You can't really do that. So your money's locked up for a lot longer. You have less access to kind of pull it out or pull portions of it out. Theoretically, you could do refinance your own property, or if the business plan for your private offering was to refinance, like most of ours are. We endeavor to get people's cash back as quickly as possible, but 3 years is very different than tomorrow. If that whatever the business plan supports.
Well, and yeah, not only is it even like the timeline of when it might even be possible for that to happen, 3 years, it's also a matter of, as we like you're currently experiencing in one of our properties, is like, just because you had an idea about refinancing, the looking into it, maybe it working out, maybe it happening, maybe you doing it, that in of itself is
I mean, interest rates have to do what they do, and the overall market has to do. Lenders have to do what they do. So, you can't just say, you can't do that with a refi either. You can't just say, "Hey, I want to refi," and they hand you money. So, again, we got to get one of these bags of money. I should put one right on that desk.
Just raise your hand. When you just raise your hand, you get money. I mean, where's that at? That's a good point. That, I mean, even if you want to go, it's a much simpler process than a syndication, but still same thing. You got to go to the bank, you got to get an appraisal. That appraisal's got to go your way. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's got to equal the number you thought it was going to equal. Yeah. So liquidity is kind of the big advantage that REITs have. Like, the returns can be really good, especially if your REIT stock is appreciating while it's paying out dividends. So, I mean, you can get REITs. REITs typically are the highest dividend payers of just about anybody in the market. The blue chip dividend stocks on the S&P 500, we're talking are, the great ones are like 3% and 4%, which typically they're appreciating in value too. So you're double dipping on your returns, but REITs often pay 6, 7, up to 10%. I mean, the solid ones, ones that have recently cratered in price. You got to be careful about this with REITs too, is that when they crater in price, their yield looks really, really good all of a sudden. If they're paying $1 per share of dividend, let's say $1 per share of dividend, a year, and it's a $40 stock, you're like, wow, that's amazing. But if it craters to 20, then you're like, wow, it's even more amazing. Look at this. It's paying $1 per 20. And it's like, okay, well, something just happened, and more than likely that dividend is not sustainable. But case in point is,
I've been surprised by the price points are all over the place for these things. They're clearly structured in lots of different ways. Because it's everything from like $2 to 130. The 116 here, Prologis, that's a big one. But I was gonna say, I looked up. Well, this is the U.S. News and World Report, so take this with a grain of salt. But this is their money thing, which tends to be more a little on point. The top 10 right now that they list, the dividends go everywhere from, or the yield goes everywhere from 2 to 5.3. But most of them are north of 4. Well, 3.5, north of 3.5. A lot of them are north of 4. There's only a few. Yeah, I mean, there's a few stocks that will do more than that. But if you're going to talk about something that's consistently every single time giving out a dividend, it's going to be 3, 2. But I would imagine that they've listed these because they're the big ones that have shown sustainability and consistency in price.
They're probably the biggest, to be honest with, like in terms of like assets held and things. A big part of those $2.5 trillion.
Yeah, American Tower Corp, which I know those are two of the biggest ones. Equinix, Welltower, Digital Realty. Yeah, those are all on here for that very reason. Excuse me. This is a little off topic, but just out of curiosity, diversification, sure. Like you can have some of this, and you can have stocks. Of course, you want to have all kinds of things. But I mean, just as a what if or a what would you do kind of thing. Like, I mean, do they show an advantage that the standard stock security doesn't, or does it really just matter which ones you're in and which stocks otherwise you're in?
REITs are considered a value stock, meaning they are a value today, and they're paying out income today. Most of the stocks that we hear about are growth stocks. Your Amazon, your Apple, they're all growth stocks. They don't really pay dividends if they pay them at all. They pay really low ones because their whole goal is to grow, capture more market share, create new products that create market share that we didn't even know we wanted, create new awesome things like an iPhone that we didn't know we wanted. And that's how they're considered growth stocks. So I think personally, I'm mostly a value stock investor. I have a bunch of growth stocks, but obviously most of my stuff is in real estate or in value stocks. Dividend income today is kind of how I look at it. So, and typically they'll appreciate over time, but very rarely do they appreciate as fast as, over the long term. You're not going to get 200, 300, 500% increases like you would, in Palantir or something. You're not going to get those skyrocketing prices. You're going to get like, okay, it might be appreciating this stock. Maybe it was $20 5 years ago. Now it's $50. Which is pretty good, doubled in value, but it's nothing like the $20 5 years ago. Now it's 328, or whatever that you get with growth stocks.
Like 15 years ago, it was like $1.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's 100.
Yeah, NVIDIA, let's go. That's kind of how a balanced portfolio should probably have both, to be honest with you. You should have growth stocks to capture like, hey, I think this is an upcoming technology or a company that's really good at harnessing technology and providing something to consumers. Or a value stock that this provides income today and actually is paying out value. I'm a cash flow guy, so having cash flow, even when it comes from stocks, is a good thing to have for any portfolio, I think.
Right. Well, I have another question, but I don't know if it's part of the next point of strategy. So if it is, you can just dive into the strategy. Yeah.
But go ahead.
I mean, it seems like one of the things that we haven't talked about that I think this is why I think this is coming up is, as far as strategy goes, if you're investing in a syndication or in individual houses, or you're in some point, you're investing in like the actual the property itself at a private equity or whatever, you're locked in, right? You don't have the liquidity, but you're locked in. The objective, the strategy, which is why I think this is coming up, is that eventually there's going to be a pretty big payday at the end. That there's going to be some kind of exit and there's going to be chunks coming back in a way that there wouldn't be.
You would have to exit the stock in order to, which is, you could consider it the same thing, but also it's not going to be the same. You're rarely going to have that same increase like a growth stock would, where, hey, I bought it at $20 and I sold it for $100, showing an $80 gain per share. That would be more like what you're doing what you're trying to do, I should say, on the private side, either buying it yourself or investing in private equity. But let's we'll kind of just use that as our segue. Basically, the other big kind of concept that you want to compare and contrast is along the lines of the strategy or criteria, investment criteria that you have as an individual versus in the REIT. So in my opinion, one of the biggest risks associated with investing in REITs, and I'll get to your question here in a second, but one of the biggest issues or risks I see with REITs is you could read a prospectus and like, hey, this is what we do. We go after, let's say, something I'm invested in, OHI. I don't even remember what it stands for anymore, but basically they buy senior living facilities, medical care facilities, and rent those out, lease those out. So you could say, okay, I like that strategy, and you've got a great track record in the past. Okay, so they've grown from XY amount to Z amount. Cool, and they've paid out this dividend regularly. But what's to tell me when they start lowering their investment standards for when they're going to buy more properties? You could pay attention to corporate releases and look at the financials, but I'm not looking at their underwriting. They're not going to share that with the public. Obviously, that's IP. That's how they make their money. But I have no idea if they're going, hey, in 2022 it was easy to buy whatever we wanted. Now things are a lot harder, so we're going to kind of lower our standards for what we're going to buy just because we want to keep buying. And that may be a good strategy, may not be a good strategy, but I don't know that. I don't understand the criteria of what they're using to select their new properties that they're going to buy, when they're going to sell. I don't have any control over that. I don't have any insight over that. So if I'm an investor, I'm kind of just believing in what the CEO or whoever's making decisions, the board or whoever, that they're going to continue doing things that I agree with, or at least tell me when they're changing something, and they may or may not. And that's to me, that's a real risk, because they could be totally changing what to them makes a good investment and something of which I don't agree. And the the stock market might not agree either. So, the price could in the future could start dipping. They could start producing less and less of a dividend, so on and so forth. So the contrast is that when you're buying a property yourself, your own rental house, you're completely in charge of that strategy. You're talking to you and your advisors. Maybe you have an agent, maybe you have a lender, whoever you're talking to about this, that, and the other, trying to build your strategy. You're completely involved in that. And same when you're in syndication, is that you get to listen to what I say. And sorry, I'm shaking my whole thing here, but you get to listen to what Matthias says, and Matthias tells you what the business plan is. You get to look at the business plan and go, that's a good one, or that's a bad one, or I'm not so sure. And you can make your decisions based on that. And you can have conversations with me and ask questions and get clarifications like, hey, if this comes up, if this situation Y happens, what are you going to do? Are you going to do, would you more likely sell? Would you more likely do this, that, or the other? And you can kind of gauge the business plan that way. So you have a lot more insight into the strategy and the kind of the investment criteria, what or the decision matrix that I'm going to be using going forward. And you can either sign up for it or not. Obviously, with a REIT, you just don't. You can sign up for it at any given snapshot of time, but it already may be changing from whatever the last time they published their guidance or their corporate, releases or whatever. So I think that's one of the big risks with REITs, and also I think one of the benefits of investing privately, either you're on your own or with a syndicator.
Well, and yeah, just to put that final point on there, a fine point on it, just to make sure that we're coming through. When you look at the business plan and read the docs for the LLC and the operating agreement and all that stuff, exactly how things are going to proceed. And it's always going to be that way as long as this syndication, LLC, and investment exist. There's no changing the strategy. There's no pivoting from what was established at that time. And if for some reason, I'll just add this on, if for some reason, say, the GP, I guess we can use Matthias, isn't deviating necessarily from the strategy, but is making decisions within the strategy that you don't think are great, you can call him and have a discussion with him /
hey man, what's going on?
And and he kind of has to listen, unlike that scenario earlier where you walk into a shareholder meeting, they don't really care what you think about anything.
Yeah.
So not only is there no changing the strategy at the base level, I mean, you're going to make decisions within that. Not only is that going to be like, I agree to this, and that is what it's going to be, there is access, if not control. I guess we should say access rather than control, but there's influence.
Yeah. Sure. That's something I've had plenty of discussions with investors about like, hey, most of them are just asking why, like what made you decide to do this, or clarification on something that we're doing, if we're suspending dividend or distributions to put a roof on a property, and they go, well, why didn't you just raise more money and put the roof on with that money instead of stopping our distributions? And I was like, well, the answer is we were confident we could do it out of cash flow and it doesn't dilute the shares. We have that fewer shares. So your shares are worth that much more because we didn't raise it. We use cash flow. So in a way, you're delaying more money later by not getting your distributions now, that kind of thing. So they just want to know why. And I'll, cause it's hard to put out a quarterly report and explain every little decision you made or every big decision you made even. And so that's something that comes with having that access that I think's important. I think people value as well.
Yeah. I think so as well. I mean, and I think even if, honestly, this is just being human, even if they see it in some form, for some people, calling and having that conversation where the same information is basically communicated, if
they just feel better
upon, they just feel better about it. Exactly.
100%. Yep.
You didn't actually, I mean, did you get around to answering my question? Or
I did not. Can you phrase it again? I knew I didn't.
I just wanted to say that I think it's a comparison between the two of strategy. Yeah. And it goes along with liquidity, which is why I think it came to my mind, because we were kind of in between those 2 points on our very official outline here. You see how official this outline is, guys?
Yeah, I've got, look at that.
It's on a sticky note, but a big sticky note.
So it's good.
Anywho, just that. I mean, it's a consideration about whether or not you want to enter syndication versus a REIT, but there's upside downside. I think I just wanted to know how you would just kind of discuss that. If someone was like, hey, I guess it would be, is there a big advantage? Can you tell me there's an advantage to the syndication because it is that long-term liquidity.
In a way, yes, because you are going to have that big exit. So a REIT is never going to sell all its assets and just be like, here's a big payday, everybody. We just go lock in these gains.
Yeah.
They just put themselves out of a job. I don't think they're ever going to do that. So, they do buy and sell and capitalize on gains and improvements of things that they've done. So yes, there are exits. But again, they're going to be rolling those into they're not necessarily going to pay that out to the shareholders. They're creating more value theoretically, and the share price is appreciating as they've turned, let's say it was $1 billion investment and now it's worth $1.7 billion, that investment that they made a few years ago, and it's paid out cash during the time. It's like, so, okay, cool, that's great. But it's not like that $0.7 billion is now going to be distributed to the shareholders. It's going to be, they're going to use it to grow. And theoretically, it was a $10 stock and now it's a, I don't know, $17 stock. We'll just make it up. But, so that's happening all this time, but you're right. There's no big cash exit that's going on. On the private side, you could sell the house, you could refinance the house and theoretically get significant amounts of capital compared to what your original investment was. Yeah. So, if you bought a house for $200,000, fixed it up, did some things, and then either, refinanced it and it valued at $350. Okay. You just theoretically made, 150 minus whatever you had to put into it. Same if you invest 100,000 in a syndication, the renovations were done, operations were efficiency maximized or whatever, and a refinance happens, you get $70,000 back. Well, now you have $70,000 back in your pocket, but you also have the same equity ownership, and you can just keep doing that in perpetuity on the, depending on whatever the business plan is for syndication. Or theoretically, at the end of 5, 7, 10, however long the business plan is, they sell the property and you get your original investment back, or whatever's left of your original investment back, plus all the equity that's been created over the business plan for the syndication. And you could be looking at equity multiples in a matter of years. And so I think that's the potential for outsized returns and quicker returns are there on the private equity side. I think that's kind of what you were getting at, is that when you're looking at a stock, you don't say, hey, I'm going to double my money in 4 or 5 years. But that's kind of a common occurrence. I won't say common, but that's something that's very achievable on the private equity, private real estate syndication side. That's something that we work to do with every investment is, hey, how many years is it going to take people to double their money? If they invest 100, how long is it going to take before I can get them $200,000, whether it's some of it's returned earlier, some of it's returned later. We sell the whole thing and it's worth twice as much, whatever. That's something that we regularly work on, try to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was trying to get to that. I don't want to make it sound like I was just asking a question that I knew the answer to and I wanted you to say it a certain way. I'm not over here puppeting. Yeah, I know. But I think, I wanted to make, there is that is another one of the trade-offs, right? Is that the lack of liquidity, right, is in a way a downside for sure. But the payoff at the end is, the patience is going to be something that's lump sum in a way that maybe a REIT would never be. Now, on the downside, again, you can jump into a REIT today and just like slowly build your holding, whereas you got to kind of amass the capital to be able to be in a private equity acquisition in the first place. So that's the other side of that coin. Yeah.
And it's, you can look at it as paying a liquidity premium. So you're letting go a lot of that potential big ticket sales and refinances when you invest in a REIT to achieve that liquidity, to gain that liquidity. But if you're doing it on the private side, and you're willing to forego the liquidity, those gains come to you as the private real estate owner. Versus the, does that make sense? It's like you're kind of giving up some of the returns in order to have the liquidity, or you're not. You're giving up the liquidity to have the returns, kind of.
Yeah. I just thought that was another one of those sliders, right? Like that we might want to talk about. Well, I think we've reached the end of my really spiffy outline. I don't know.
That was the bottom of my yellow sheet.
Yeah, I ran out of
I'm not quite melting yet. I'm doing okay.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We are running against our own limits though here, as far as what we hopefully try to come in under, because we don't want, we don't need to be blathering on and on. So I think that's a good place to stop. per usual, we appreciate you hanging out with us and listening. And if you've got any questions about this follow-up, you can comment on the bottom of this posting in Substack. You can comment on Spotify. You can hit us up on the website. You can DM us through LinkedIn. There's just all the ways. You can like and restack, etc. There's just tons of ways to get a hold of us, and we'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, as always, we appreciate you hanging out. And we hope you come back to listen to us again next week on another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
See ya.